Would you like to see the conclusion of the Coco Coir versus dried leaves? Hi, welcome to White Davy Garden and Worm Farm. If you like my channel, please subscribe. So this is the Coco Coir, and we started this experiment about 2 months ago. These purple Japanese yam were actually put in here as food for the worms, but they decided to grow instead. So now I'm going to be taking them out and planting them somewhere else because we're going to be concluding this experiment. But I end up with a lot of plants, so I'm happy. Okay, I see even a piece of a potato that these guys were fed is trying to grow. So let's look through this material. And when I started this experiment, the only thing that I had in here are the Coco Coir, the food that the worms are being fed. Both bins are being fed the same thing, same amount, same time, same amount of moisture being added, and the worms. So that's all that goes into these bins. And as you can see, there is a bit of castings, but as you look at the color of this content, you will notice that most of it is not castings, but actually Coco Coir. So after near roughly 2 months, I think it's a little more than 2 months, we have very little castings in here. Lots of worm, very little castings, and after 2 months you would expect to see these worms being larger than this, right? So one of the things, or the things that I notice about the Coco Coir, is that when I was starting this experiment, the Coco Coir absorbed the moisture faster than the dried leaves did. And the next thing that I noticed during the course of the experiment is that the Coco Coir tends to dry out faster than the dried leaves. Now let's take a look at the dried leaves bin. I still have a few leaves in there to process, but as you look at the content, you can see that most of it is processed. These worms are a little bit small too. So the worms in both bins are pretty much the same size. Both bins have not finished the food scraps that they were given, but as you look at the content of this bin, you will see where they have consumed most of the leaves. So most of what we're seeing here is actually castings. So the leaf took a longer time to absorb the water when we were starting the experiment than the Coco Coir did. But then once the leaves have actually absorbed the water, then they stay moist longer than the Coco Coir. So the winner in this experiment is the the dried leaves as bedding. What I would recommend, however, if you're going to be using Coco Coir as bedding, is that you combine it with some other form of bedding. and then it will perform better, a whole lot better. For example, you know that I have been starting breeder bins, cocoon bins, indoors in the last few weeks, the last 4 to 5 weeks. And in the last 3 weeks, some of those bins, I have been using just Coco Coir and compost as the bedding. And those bins are doing very well. They're doing exceptionally well. The worms are very fat compared to these ones that have been in here for 2 months or a little bit more than 2 months. Those worms are very fat. There are at least 2 to 3 times these worms in size, and those bins were started just 3 or so weeks ago. So if you're going to be using Coco Coir as a bedding, then I'd strongly recommend mixing it with something else, but do not use it by itself, or it will take a longer time for the worms to process. So this is the conclusion of our compost versus, sorry, not compost, or coir, Coco Coir versus dried leaves. The dried leaves are the winner. So if you enjoyed this experiment and you would like to see more experiments like these, please take a moment to give me a thumbs up. You can leave your comment in the section below. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe and turn on your notification for more updates like these. Thank you so much for watching, and have yourself a wonderful day. Yeah man, a time for grow.